What I've Done. Written by Night Breeze. Read by No One and Nobody. Chapter 4.
What should we expect when we meet it?
Silverback asked quietly as they approached the hospital wing of the castle.
He will only look marginally similar to the creatures that I've shown you in the photographs. Because of the severity of his injuries, we were forced to use regenerative magic to save his life,
Celestia said as she calmly led the way.
This forced his body to revert to its original form, though his arms and legs resisted the change. He is still very weak, so I suggest discretion in your questioning.
Silverback nodded at this, his wild mane flying every which way as he conveyed his understanding.
I understand, though I was actually wondering more on its personality, and how it would react to us.
Personality-wise, he is not much different from any other sapient species. He is intelligent, resourceful, and has a collection of quirks and flaws,
Celestia said as she opened the door to the hospital wing.
I admit that I do not know him as well as I would like to. Recent events have forced me to play a less active role in this. My sister Luna would know more of his mental state, and how he reacts to certain situations.
Fascinating. However, I was wondering, why didn't its limbs respond to your treatment? Gustav asked as he quirked an eyebrow.
Based on the evidence that we have gathered, we believe it is because his limbs are either partially or completely artificial. They didn't revert to their old form simply because they had no old form,
Celestia said quietly. Are you telling me that they amputated its limbs, only to replace them with metallic fakes? Gustav asked in horror.
Not quite. I'm not sure how it was done, but the limbs are organic in nature. They also appear to have been grafted onto his body, not grown in any way,
Celestia answered, shaking her head a little.
We eventually planned to amputate his limbs and regrow new ones, but he is too weak right now, and would not survive the procedure. Why not leave the limbs unchanged? Surely he gains nothing from this exchange,
Lady Abele asked curiously.
Because his body doesn't recognize his limbs as his own anymore. Because of this, his immune system is actively trying to attack and kill both his arms and legs. If we were to leave them, as you suggest, then he would suffer an extremely painful death over the next several months. No, they need to come off. We just have to wait until his body is able to withstand the procedure,
Celestia said as she stopped in front of an unassuming door.
I understand his terrible state. Let us hope that we can save him from this fate,
Lady Abele said, as Celestia raised her hoof and knocked on the door. The four did not have to wait long at the closed door, it being opened almost immediately to reveal Dr. Tendercare on the other side.
Princess Celestia, what brings you down here, Your Highness?
She asked as she fell into a deep bow.
Yes, what brings you here, sister? I thought you were apprising the delegates of the current And I can see that they are here with you,
Luna said as she rounded into view, clearly surprised to see them.
I apologize for the unexpected visit, but the delegates insisted that it was urgent that we speak with Alex before we decide on anything else,
Celestia told Luna quietly.
I don't think that is wise, sister. He is only recently awakened, and is still very weak from surgery,
Luna said, a little bit of annoyance creeping into her voice as she spoke. Can you at least ask it if it can spare even a few minutes to speak with us? Gustav pleaded. Luna fixed him with a withering look, then sighed in surrender.
I will, but on one condition.
What is that?
You are not to refer to him as an it in his presence, or in mine. He is a thinking, intelligent individual who has gone through quite enough without having to be degraded to the role of a mere monster. If you address him, you are to either address him by his name or by our rough translation of his name, not as monster or creature. Am I understood?
Luna said, her gaze boring into the assembled diplomat's eyes. Silverback spluttered in indignation, clearly taken aback by Luna's bold words.
Princess, you cannot possibly be serious. This is an alien. It has no rights on this planet.
I am afraid she is quite serious, as am I. I was willing to let your previous faux pas slide, but from this point on, you must start treating him like an actual person, especially if you want any answers out of him, Celestia said pointedly. Silverback spluttered impotently a little more, but was quieted as Gustav raised a single talon.
Of course, Your Highness. I apologize for my conduct earlier. It was unbecoming of a warrior and a diplomat, Gustav said pointedly with a bow, glancing back at Silverback as he spoke. Especially since he is the sole representative of his race, and therefore a kind of diplomat himself. Since he has committed no crime according to your laws or ours, we must treat him as such. Silverback opened his mouth a few more times, but then promptly closed it, as what Gustav said slowly sunk into his brain.
Yes, I apologize as well.
Now, before you go in and ask him if we can see him, might I inquire of his name? Gustav asked as he rose from his bow. Luna smiled at the griffin, then nodded her head.
Apology accepted, Chancellor Gustav. I can see why the Emperor appointed you to be his voice here in Equestria,
Luna said, nodding her head in acknowledgement.
His name is Alex. If you have trouble pronouncing that, his name translates into Equestrian as Defender of People, or Defender for short. He will respond to either, though more strongly to his given name.
Thank you, Princess of the Moon, Gustav said with another bow. I looked down at the wonderful meal that the ponies had brought me, fork in one hand and spoon in the other. It was surprisingly similar to the kind of fare that I could expect back home. There were what appeared to be yellow lumps of something, which upon closer examination turned out to have the exact taste and consistency of scrambled eggs. Next to the eggs were 2 slices of buttered toast, while a bowl of hot mush sat just above the plate. The mush proved to be very similar to oatmeal in taste and consistency, though they seemed to have sweetened it in some manner. Yeah, you can call me a freak, but I've always kind of liked oatmeal. That being said, I quickly dove in and started spooning the delicious concoction into my mouth. Sure, it was simple food, but to me, it was a feast worthy of any king.
This is odd,
I said as I took another spoonful of the delightful meal in front of me.
What not right?
Moon asked, a little puzzled.
Food not liking?
No, the food is delicious. I didn't mean that something was wrong. What I meant was that something didn't fit. Something was out of place,
I clarified. A flash of understanding crossed Moon's features, and she nodded at that.
What not in right place? Well, did you know that I'm not exactly from this world?
I asked hesitantly. She nodded at that, though she had a sad look in her eyes as she did so.
Yes, we talk about before this. When first wake up, we find ship. We find remains of Alex's brothers and sisters. We find those responsible as well. Have many questions about happenings. Ask later.
That stopped me in my tracks. I actually couldn't remember telling her about that before, though that was probably the drugs talking. That being said, I was floored by this information.
They knew? This whole time?
I thought to myself in wonder.
If you knew that I was an alien, then why? Why did you give me the benefit of the doubt? I could have been an alien monster, bent on devouring all of you. Why did you not capture or kill me?
I asked incredulously. She just smiled at that, then shook her head.
It true, you scare us before. We not sure what think when see crash. It look like one monster kill other monster. Not know if any survive. We doubt you monster, though, because of how treat subject. You bring home orange vegetable hair safe and sound. Only run when we meet. Mind pure, intelligent. We doubt monster, because not act monster. Act willful, act good, act people,
she said as she sat down next to the bed.
But not think that what meant when say thing and not replace?
I shook my head at that as I tried to wrap my mind around what she had said. No, I didn't mean that, I said with a nervous chuckle. What I meant was that it is uncanny how much your world parallels my own.
What meant by line follow each other?
she asked me as she raised an eyebrow.
No, I mean that things here are the same as things back home,
I explained to her.
For example, this food looks and tastes a lot like the kind of stuff that I would eat back home. I've noticed that a lot about your foods, that many of them would fit right alongside the foods that I would eat back home. Not only that, but many of our facial expressions mirror each other. A nod means yes, a shake of the head from side to side means no, and that's just touching the surface.
She nodded at that, her eyes widening a bit at this revelation.
That's strange, that thing becomes so same between worlds. Think talk more on same and different, once no language. Better explain thing, better explain word, better learn.
I nodded at that.
I agree. However, for now, I think I would prefer to eat the first real meal that I've had in a very long time,
I said, as I spooned another delicious bite into my mouth. She smiled at that and nodded as I quietly began to eat what was in front of me. As I made my way through the meal, however, I was interrupted by another knock on the door of the room. I ignored it, opting to continue eating, feeling pretty safe in my assumption that it was for Moon or one of the doctors. After all, Moon was clearly an important person, so it stood to reason that her time would be highly valued among the ruling class here. As for me, I was a guest and a patient, and I didn't really think that anyone would be looking for an audience from me, especially not so soon after surgery. However, as I pointedly continued to ignore the conversation at the door, I couldn't help but overhear the slight annoyance in Moon's voice. Nor could I ignore the fact that there seemed to be quite the crowd on the other side. I perked up as Moon approached me, her demeanor that of someone who would rather be doing anything else at the moment. It was also clear that she didn't want to involve me in whatever was happening.
I am apology,
Moon said as she nodded her head solemnly.
But some here wish speak. No mean harm. Represent other countries. Need to know about outsiders like you. Need to know about ship.
I nearly had a heart attack when she said that.
If she means what I think she means, then... Oh dear,
I thought nervously.
Is there any chance we could get them to come back later?
I asked, though I already knew what the answer was going to be.
No, they need hear what have say. You complicate things, though not mean to. Monsters may come back. Need decide what do,
she said, shaking her head wearily. I sighed at that. While inward, I felt very guilty. I put these people at risk, and here I am, selfishly thinking of how to get out of a meeting with them. The least I could do is let them know what they're up against, I thought as I straightened up a little.
Okay, go ahead and let them in,
I said as I readied myself for what was to come. Moon nodded at this, then turned to the door.
You come please in. Sister, cast word no spell on guests. Let know what we talk when speak to Alex,
she said to the open door. The first to enter was, surprisingly enough, another horned Pegasus mare like Moon. Like Moon, she wore royal regalia and had a mane and tail that seemed to flutter and wave in an unfelt breeze. However, that was where the similarities ended. She was taller, for starters, with a coat that was the purest white I had ever seen. On either of her flanks was emblazoned a stylized version of the sun, while her regalia was made of what appeared to be pure gold. They didn't have her flank tattoo stamped on them, however, instead, each bore a diamond-shaped purple gem in their center. Her mane and tail resembled nothing short of the glowing aurora borealis of the north, what with its constantly moving pinks, greens, and blues. However, as striking as she was, that was nothing compared to her eyes. They say that the eyes are the windows to the soul. Never before has that statement been more true than when I looked into the eyes of the sun goddess. Her magenta stare seemed to carry the weight of eons behind them, and with that weight was a strength beyond anything that I had ever seen before. However, as strong as that gaze was, it was also tempered with kindness and wisdom, almost like the gaze of a mother. Almost unconsciously, I straightened up in my bed and swallowed uncomfortably.
Greetings, Alex. I, Sun Goddess. We come, need answer questions. You feel ready, answer?
The white mare asked kindly.
Sure. What did you want to know?
I asked uncertainly. would hear for self what thing aliens do.
A male voice said from behind Sun. The distinctly male voice made me realize very quickly that the sun goddess didn't enter the room alone. Behind her were 3 others, though their appearance made me quickly reevaluate the planet I was on, forcing me to seriously wonder if I wasn't just hallucinating living in a game of Dungeons and Dragons. The tallest and therefore most noticeable of the 3 was easily the Minotaur. He clearly stood about 8 feet tall, if you included the rather impressive horns on either side of his head. His long, wild mane was a vibrant red, as was the shaggy fur on his lower half. The silver-gray fur on his upper half was much, much shorter, allowing me to clearly see his strong, powerful frame. His beady blue eyes had a guarded, almost apprehensive look to them, and were staring at me, almost as if he were daring me to make a wrong move. At his side was a rather small zebra mare, whose mane was currently tied back into a ponytail. Her eyes were a rich pink color, while on her flanks was a group of symbols that I could only guess the meaning of. Those symbols seemed to meld seamlessly with the striped pattern of her fur, making them hard to notice, yet quite beautiful when they were. Her gaze was a curious one, but behind that demeanor was wisdom and intelligence beyond her years. In front of the 2 of them, however, was the originator of the male voice. He was a rather stocky griffin with a deep black plumage, while his hindquarters were a much lighter shade of gray. Across his right eye I could see a nasty-looking scar, behind which his eye was covered in a milky white film. His other eye was clear and bright, its amber gaze locked with mine as he studied me intently, analyzing everything about me down to the smallest detail.
"Excuse me?"
I asked, a little unsure of what he meant.
"We want to know what alien do to Alex. Need decide on course of action. Hear for self, see for self. What do to you, what may do to all," the griffin said slowly.
"Who are you?"
I asked him politely.
"I am the one who speaks. Staff of the gods, I speak for Griffin Empire. Need no danger of enemy. Need no depth of depravity. Need know you,"
Staff said gravely. I nodded at that, then gulped, well aware that I now had a full-blown audience of creatures that, at one point, I had thought only existed in fairy tales.
"Okay. I suppose the best place to start is the beginning."
If you're enjoying this reading, consider checking out the non-copyright infringement version available on Amazon Prime. See link in video details for more information.